changes that affects nearly every system of your body. And we're going to see that during the presentation. And it influences how we feel, how we behave, basically, and how we function in society as large. And by causing the mind and the body changes, stress contributes directly to psychological and to psychological disorders and diseases, and affects our mental and our physical health. But although there are all these life stressors, the science, the psychological science, it focuses on seven major sources of stress. Next slide. Seven major sources of stress. Um, Go ahead. So these seven major sources of stress, these are life changes. There's also what we call acute or chronic stressors, I should say, job stressors, conflict, hassles, frustration, and the other thing that we know, cataclysmic events. So, what is constituted a life change? What would you call a life change? That would be a stressor. When you lose somebody, a loved one. What else? Lose a job. What else? Having a baby. That's right. When you have a lot of things to do, you don't have time to do it. Death. That's correct. What else? No money to buy what you need. That is correct. So all these things, right? They are considered life changes that could cause a degree of stress. So when we are exposed to these stressors, they create what we call, even though for a short period, it really can have a detrimental effect on our health. Did you know that getting into a car accident or even a near car accident is a stressor? What happens to you? Your heart rate goes up, you start sweating, right? Although it's a short term stress, but it's basically a stressful event that can cause a detrimental effect on your health. Now, acute or chronic stress, the car accident is what we call an acute stress, right? It happens, you recover from it, and you move on. If you in school you miss a deadline, right? For you, I'm sure sometimes you have some papers to give and you're stressing over giving them, or you give all your work on time. Yeah, I'm not putting you on the spot. So basically, and I know when you have a deadline, even at work, if you have a project, you have something to do. For those of us who can, go to work late, like you're stressing, you're running, you're speeding, right? And things are happening. So these are what we call acute stress. They are for a moment, they happen, they raise our heart rate, and then it's short term, we can recover. Acute stress is actually something that is severe. It's prolonged, it's continued, and that's the stress that really impacts our physical health when it comes to our blood pressure, our heart rate causes dizziness, chest pain, and sometimes can lead to developing anxiety. But because the stress, they are again short term, they you can recover for them, but the acute stress, it's very difficult to recover because it's constantly there. Let's say you're at work and you have a boss who's giving you a hard time, or a supervisor who just doesn't like you. So these are what we call chronic stress, because they're there. You need to pay your bills, you need to do what you need to do, take care of your family. You can't quit your job, right? But so you're in the situation, you have no way to remove yourself. These are chronic stressors. So tied into the job stressors, right, which is what we're talking about, then conflict are also called stressors because it can arise when you experience conflict, either at home, at church, and the community, school. There are so many things that happen in family dynamic that can cause conflict, and these conflict, they can become lasting stressors or acute stress, right, or chronic stress if we don't deal with them. The way we resolve conflict is important. And if we were talking about conflict resolution, I would have gone into it in depth, but for time, I'm just going to leave it as that. Learning how to resolve conflict is important to recover from chronic stress. Hassles, right? These are minor daily living things that we, share some of these hassles, financial concerns, right? To pay our bills, where is the light money going to come from, where's the mortgage is going to come from, and having a baby. These are the hassles of that can create stress. And all these again can create what we call burnout and exhaustion, which will lead, if it's work related, you are unable to go to work, you are not able to produce, and also these continued stressors can also increase your health risk. So frustration is also another factor, another stressor, that when you are frustrated, right? Your job interview, you're late for, you're late for work. This is called repeated stress. So every morning you get stuck behind the bus, you get stuck in traffic. How many people commute to the city from here? Yes. That one, I don't know if you take the Tappan Zee Bridge, but I call it the parking lot. Although they build it, they make it bigger. It doesn't matter how big they make that bridge. Traffic doesn't improve. So hopefully, it doesn't matter what day. It used to be a little bit better on Sundays, but now it's even worse with the people traveling, coming from upstate to go away for the weekend. Anyway, so these are the hassles, right, or the frustrations that can perpetuate the stress. The next major thing, which is the last one on the list, is the cataclysmic events. So when we experience like a terrorist attack, right, like 9/11, when it happened, these are our natural disasters. We recently experienced a small earthquake. I don't know for you, but my heart was pounding because I was in a meeting. I didn't know what was happening. All I heard was do 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 do, and I was like, "What's going on? Is my boiler blowing?" So for a moment, it took me a minute to recover. So that's what with these had it. I mean, thank God it wasn't bigger, but we can imagine people who were in places in Taiwan. I think a few days before that, they had a massive one. So made those natural disasters. They are stressors, and they are they can become, again, although temporary, but they can cause chronic stress. So scientists have come together. Go ahead. They Thank you. So, what they've discovered is that stress impacts the body in a very serious way. So, there's this scientist, is from Canada in 1936. He discovered what we call he describes what we call the psychological reaction to stress. And he matched three systems in order for him to explain what happens to the body when you go through stress. And that system that he explains is called the General Adaptation Syndrome, also known as GAS. Says it happens in three phases. The first one is the alarm phase, the resistance, and the exhaustion. That basically they are all activated by any stressor, whether it is physical, psychological. So what happens in the alarm phase, to go fast because I want to give you time to ask questions, is that when you are surprised and you're facing a threat, your body automatically activates. It enters what we call the alarm phase. That's where, for those of you who study biology or the medical field, or you know that there we have two systems: the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. So the sympathetic nervous system, what it does, it activates automatically, increases your heart rate and your blood pressure, and it tells your body you're gonna either run, you're gonna either freeze, or you're gonna fight, right? So now the resistance phase is where the stress continues and your body attempts to resist it and to adapt to the stressor. So you're trying to figure out what's happening, get acclimated. So during that resistance stage, people use a variety of, that's where your coping skills they come in, right? Taking a deep breath, trying to think, quick reaction. So that's during that time period where your body activates its coping mechanism to really do something about the stress and correct it. So for instance, if you're at work and your job is threatened, you might put in extra time, you might put in extra work, you might come work, early, work later to see if you would preserve your job. You might even not take a vacation just so you don't lose your job. Now, the final phase, which is the exhaustion phase, is where your body's resistance to stress can only last but for so long. And then you literally just give up. And at that point, it's already caused irreversible damage to the body, or the body has adapted to stress so much that it doesn't know any other way to react but within the fight, flight, and freeze. Next. I think you went too fast. Okay, that's it. Yep. So there are some common signs of stress. So how do you know you're stressed? Without looking at these, well, it's already there. But how do you know when you're stressed? What is it? You feel it in your body. Where? Everywhere. Sometimes you get headaches. What else? Can't hear you. You can't sleep. Some people are nauseous. How about stomach ache? Right? How about irritability? You come home and your spouse talks to you. You don't have time for them. Your kids, they want to have your attention. And you start snapping at them, kind of go away. I don't have time for this. I'm tired. Does that happen? Yeah, so when we are stressed, right, it's very hard to be effective in our interpersonal relationships. We come to church and Sabbath, we had a stressful week, and sister comes in front of the door and looked at us the wrong way. I haven't been here in a while, but I know this is human dynamic, right? The person look at you the wrong way, and you're ready to tear their head off, but it's not for the Holy Spirit and Jesus. Boy, you will tell them about themselves. So that's basically what stress does, right? So all these items are common signs of stress. So even concentration, sometimes even your memory is impacted because of the level of stress. One thing that I would like to mention, there's a big difference between stress and anxiety. I know sometimes people they confuse the two, right? Although stress can lead to anxiety, but being stressed is not the same as having anxiety. Because stress comes from external stressors or triggers versus anxiety comes from internal fears that we have. Just wanted to put that out there. Next. So now, what happens to our immune system, right, when we are facing stress? Do you find that when you are stressed, perhaps if you can't sleep, who gets like a cold or gets like a sore throat or a runny nose if they are unable to sleep and they're stressed? I do. That's when I know I need to take a break because I catch a cold and I can't fight it. For my immune system is weak. Sometimes you have aches and pain and you can't get out of bed because of all the stress. So what happened when you experience a stressor? The stressor enters our body through our cerebral cortex, right? And that's where the stress is interpreted. Now, we have in our beautiful biological system, the way God has created us, although the science has shown that we were not created for prolonged stress, but our body has a way of receiving the stress and processing information. So, in our limbic system, which we'll see the next slide, not yet, there are some, how would I say this? Parts. And one of them that processes information is our hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, what it does, it activates our SAM. That SAM is called sympathomedullary pathway, which is where the cortisol, which we talk about all the time, right? Don't ask me for to pronounce the scientific name of cortisol. I'll try. So when the hypothalamus receives the message from the cerebral cortex, there's a stressor coming. So let's say you're getting into a car accident or a near accident. So everything is activated through that system. And that system, it provides that rapid stress response. So, and then what that SAM does, it tells the nervous system, hey, wake up, and it stimulates the adrenal medulla, which is that little gland right there that's right above your kidneys, right? And that adrenal medulla, it basically releases what we call the norepinephrine and the epinephrine that increases our heart rate and the blood pressure, the respiration, our muscles tension, and our digestion basically decreases in a moment of stress. right? When you're facing the stress, you can't eat, you're sweating, and your blood vessels, they become constricted. And that SAM, which is the sympathomedullary pathway, which is activated, that's when it basically shuts down. I mean, it's activated and it releases the cortisol. So now the hypothalamus sends a message to the hypothalamic pituitary, which is your adrenal system, and it tells it activate your pituitary glands, and your pituitary glands are located in your brain, so right above your amygdala, which is somewhere here in the prefrontal cortex, and it releases the glucocorticoids, which is the cortisol, and that cortisol increases your metabolism and your blood sugar levels, which leads to an increased energy. So that's why when someone says, you know, you're running on adrenaline, somebody can lift up a train to save their child or pick up a car. So that's what it is. It gives you this boost of energy. And then when the stress is removed, now all those rising level in your brain, they basically shut down, and the chemical messages sent to the pituitary gland is basically to tell it, now, whoof, danger is avoided, everything can go back to normal. So what happens when your body is constantly going through that cycle, that's when you know that your all these systems, they are activated. So your pituitary gland and all the glands in your body, basically, that sends messages onto your digestive system, to your heart rate, to, and these are the prolonged stress impacting the immune system, that can that will impact your cognitive functioning, your ability to think, to see things clearly, that can cause hypertension, depression. There's also what is known as PTSD, post traumatic stress. Some people develop Alzheimer's, right? They develop colitis, which is digestive tract challenges, rheumatoid arthritis. If you have arthritis, or if you are experiencing prolonged stress, which is chronic stress, we're going to talk about how to really release these things so your body can take care of itself. Because when what causes arthritis is the inflammation that happens in your system. There's other, you can also develop what we call periodontal diseases, um, as well as cancer. So stress is really not good for us, right? The next slide, which is what happens with the cognitive functioning. We're talking about all these. So these, that's your basically your emotional brain, right? That sits inside your, the emotional brain is mostly in your prefrontal cortex, but it's located in both the right and the left hemisphere. It's not a study on biology, so I don't want to break it down. But simply to know that long-term exposure to cortisol can permanently damage your hippocampus, which is a key part of your brain that's involved in memory. And once the hippocampus is damaged, it cannot provide proper feedback to your hypothalamus. So your cortisol continues to be released in your body, and it creates that vicious cycle. So these are all the parts of your brain that is activated: your hypothalamus, your hippocampus, your amygdala, um, your pituitary gland, and all that basically that secretes that cortisol in your body. Go ahead. So there is also what is known as beneficial stress. That beneficial stress is known as eustress. And what it is, it's something that is actually needed for humans or individuals to function, right? To get that motivation that is needed. It's what we call the good stress. Like you have a paper to write, you stay up, you write the paper, or you kind of spend a couple of days doing the research, writing the paper. That's the motivation that is needed in order for you to perform and to do well. It's also if you have a meeting to present, like the pastor, when he has to pastor the church, he has to come in, do a sermon, do a study, do a presentation. I know you're going to be doing one after this. So these are the good stress, right? It's something that is, it doesn't really impact you in a negative way physically or psychologically. However, if you continue to be a procrastinator and always be stressed, then there are consequences. All right. So basically, how do we manage our stress? What do we do? Anybody know? For those of you who have been able to engage in stress management, how do you manage your stress? No, no, no. I think they want to hear what you're saying. I'll share the mic.
How do you prevent stress from percolating in the subconscious mind, the id, the id, the ego, the superego, and from popping up through that trap door?
That's an amazing question. So, how do you prevent that stress to basically populate, right? How do you percolate to kind of basically continue and go nonstop, right? Correct. So, how do you do that? We all, I would say, I don't know the lives of everybody here, but most people live very stressful life. Even if you're retired, for some reason, I find that people who are retired, they are even busier than those who work a full-time job. So, how do you stop that stress from percolating? And I think it's a great question Pastor Marshall is asking. Is really the first thing to do is to assess. We don't know how to create boundaries for ourselves. I think proper boundary is the first thing that is needed. This is something that I had to learn myself, and learning how to say no, because we don't want to offend. We don't want to basically disappoint people. We don't say no. There is something that is being promoted called self care. I know that people look at it, oh, it's being selfish. No, self care is important. What self care tells you, and it took me a very long time for me to understand the two greatest commandment that Jesus gave us, which is to love the Lord our God with all our minds, or with all our hearts, souls, and mind, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. I believe in order for me to love you, I have to first be able to love myself. So if I can't take care of myself, then I can't take care of you. And the whole concept of the airplane, put on your mask first before you put the mask on somebody else. That's how you manage that, right? Yes, you have to take care of things, but it's good to structure your life in a way that, not in a selfish way that you're putting yourself first, but if the load is too much, to know how to ask for help. How to say, you know what, I can't do this today. I was supposed to go and do this visit, but today I'm tired. And it's really the way to do it. Now, when it comes to um, regurgitating the stress and kind of have it, is to learn to remove yourself from the stress or to remove the stress from you. Financial burdens, right? This is one of the things that creates the most stressful situation for us individuals. And sometimes these are self-created problems, right? There is always a way for us to add discipline to our lives. For me, what I have learned to do is I work as a therapist. And as a therapist, I all day long work with people, listen to people, counsel people. Sometimes I see about 13 people a day. So at the end of the day, you are exhausted, your mind is mush. So what I have done, well, I've always done it, but now even more, I use First Thessalonians 5, verse 17, that says, pray without ceasing. I have learned to apply that concept. It may seem something that is very trivial or very small, but I find as Christians, we forget the tools that Jesus has given to us in order for us to overcome the burdens of life and to really manage our lives. When the sister asked me, do you have a verse for today? The first verse that popped in my head is Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. So the idea is to trust. In order for you to trust, you have to believe that even if I have financial problems, that if I didn't create them for myself, because I have to pay my rent, I have to do this. If you lose your job, you're not the one who's created losing your job. But knowing that, you know what, I'm going to go to sleep at night because God says his mercies renew every morning. Great is his faithfulness. So if I lose my job, if he has allowed me to lose my job, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to praise him, because in praising him, then I can still be okay because he's going to take care of me. I know that I had to learn, and I'm only sharing my experiences. When things get tough for me, the thing that comes to my mind is, if God fed Elijah, if he allowed a tree to grow above Jonah, who was disgruntled, right, to put him, to cover him and provide him with shade, what is it that God cannot do? So that's when I learned to cast my burden. So to answer your question, that's what works for me. When I engage in self-care, my self-care is the time that I spend with God. I do my nails, I do my hair, but the most gratifying thing for me is the time that I spend with God. I find it recharges me, I find it calms my fears, it soothes my brain, and it's just basically rejuvenating. That's basically yes.
Creates the element that you're using
Mm-hmm.
is stress. Suppose that in turn creates a guilt complex because of the nature of the issue that's percolating in the subconscious mind. You understand me? Okay, you use the word visitation. I'm a pastor. I should visit. I don't feel like visiting today. I'm very tired and I feel exhausted. Because I'm very tired and I feel exhausted, I can dismiss that. Yeah, I need to rest just like anybody else. Jesus said, come unto me, all you that labor and heavy laden, and I will give you the rest. So I'm going to rest. But the subconscious mind says, but that's your job.
Great
So
example.
now it is creating this de-stressor. It's creating a guilt complex. How do I get rid of this root altogether? How do I plug it in by the root?
Okay, good. I'm
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up, Pastor. And you know what? This is my answer to this question. When you say you're tired, some people, they task projects that are just too much and they are unrealistic in how they divide their time. We sometimes don't keep schedule. It wasn't until I became a therapist I understood the value of 30 minutes. Because you see commercials, they last what? How long? They give you a message in a commercial for how long? 30 seconds? 30 seconds. And they say everything they need to say to you. Because we don't structure our time well, we tend to overload ourselves with things that, I'm not saying that are not important, but it's knowing how to create those boundaries. If I'm going to do visits, I'm going to use that example, Pastor, then perhaps I'm not going to go to the church today and meet with 5 people, because I know at the end of the day, I still have to go visit the sick and shut ins that are in the hospital, or sister so and so, or this family who has a death in their family. It's also called prioritizing. But if at the end of the day, because emergencies do happen, events beyond your control, there's nothing you can do. If I told you, Sister Cadet, I'm going to come visit you today and I'm not going to make it, I can make a courtesy call and say, I truly apologize. I really plan on coming to visit you at 4 o'clock. I had 2 emergencies back to back. Is it okay if I come see you tomorrow? That doesn't make you less a pastor. That just makes you a human being who also needs rest, because burnout is real for the ministers too. So, self care, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your flock. Because if you are short fused, you're irritated, you're exhausted, and you cannot think cognitively, then the devil will send distractions to come to that subconscious and start feeding you all these negative thoughts. You're a terrible pastor, you this, you that, these are all the things you're doing wrong. And you start talking, and that's when the anxiety comes in. So that's how stress can trigger anxiety to really, because the negative things that we start feeding ourselves about how we're not good, right? And that's where it comes in. So if we structure our days and manage our projects, and if you, well, that's one thing I do teach people, time management, because I had to learn it myself. Like I say, when I learned the value of 30 minutes, when you sit with someone, you can actually have a well structured, effective session for 30 minutes. You're like, what can you do in 30 minutes? You can do a whole lifetime in 30 minutes. So, what it means, like, if you're gonna do a project that you know is gonna take you 3 hours, don't try to do it in an hour and a half, Because if the project is supposed to take 3 hours, even if you try to do it in an hour and a half, it's going to take you 3 hours. So plan 3 hours for it, budget 3 hours for it. If you finish in two, then you have an hour to rest, to recover, do something else, and then move on to the next project.
The next time I feel overwhelmed, I'll be asking you for your contact and call you
Not a problem.
excellent.
Because emergencies do happen. We can't bank for emergencies. That's why it's important to budget our time well so we can plan for the unforeseen. Any other questions? Yeah. So, my question to you is, do you know what self care is, or how do you engage in self care to manage your stressors? What do you do? Take a soak. I like that. It's relaxing. I hope you put some music in the background. You just chill. Physical activity. Yes. Take a nap. I like that. Sometimes I do. Take a walk. That's very important. See, there is something that I tell people, and I find that our society has significantly increased in the use of melatonin for them to go to sleep. It is a disease that is raging rampant, and it's eating us alive. Because you have children now who are taking melatonin because they are not able to sleep, and it creates an increased stress. That's why you have a lot of children that are being diagnosed with ADHD. I know it's not part of our conversation. I think it's important to talk about this. One of the things that we fail to do as a people is understand the gifts that God has given to us through creation. Because blue light is something that is natural that the Lord has given to us. So when people blue light, I'm explaining it. So let me move around. Blue light, what it was, or what it is, it's the light that comes before dawn. So back in the days when people didn't have clock, you always ask yourselves, how did these farmers wake up? How did they know what time it was? People used to look at the position of the sun to know what time it is, right? So blue light is the light that right before daytime is the light that comes into the sky that sends a message to your brain that tells it to stop releasing melatonin so you can wake up. So, what has been done, your cell phones, your computers, your televisions, they all have the manufactured blue light in it. So, the longer you spend on your cell phone, the longer you're telling your brain to stay awake. That is the reason why we are becoming unable to sleep. The stress levels are rising. We are more irritable, short fuse because we don't have patience, because we are so busy, right? We are busy and busy and busy and busy and busy. We're like rat race. Zzz, we're spinning our wheels like little hamsters. So that's what it is. If we learn to disconnect, take 15 minutes in a day, take a power nap. It's such an amazing thing. Sunny outside. Even for those of you who work from home, if you are working from home, people tend to work from home, sit in front of that computer, roll out of bed in their pajamas, just throw a nice shirt on top, sit in meetings, and then basically eat lunch at their desk. And it's very sedentary. It increases your stress, it reduces your socialization. We need human contact in order for us to able to hormones for us to be able to smile, to relax, to distress and decompress. So the more time we spend on our devices, the more isolated we become, the harder it is for us to function and the more stressed we are. So if you work from home, schedule time, even if it's 30 minutes before you schedule to work, get up. If you live in an apartment, step outside of your building. If you live in your house and you have a backyard, step out on your deck. If you don't, step out on your front. If, I'm not even saying ambitiously go for a walk, although that's what you should do. But if you can just get up and take 5 minutes of daylight, it's very good for you. It helps with distressing.
So the blue light is the light that you said that dissipates from the sky.
It comes in just before dawn. Before, like, that's when, when it gets dark and says that's when you say it's dark, daylight is surely coming. That's that little light that comes in before before the daylight. Yes. Well, that I don't know. That's a great question.
The correlationship between the blue light and vitamin D3. I'm wondering what quotient of vitamin D3 is emitted, or it seems like it would not be when that's happening.
So, because vitamin D,
Rays of the sun.
apparently we get it with rays of the sun. So the blue light, what it does for your body, because we have, when you look at your circadian rhythm, which is what your internal, what we call the biological clock. So when you look at the biological clock, every hour there's something that happens in your body. So there's a moment in the day when it's time to wake up. Your body, because of the blue light that God has given to us, that's natural, tells your brain stop releasing melatonin because it's time for them to wake up, right? For you to wake up. It's the same thing at a certain time. Your brain tells your body, start releasing melatonin because now it's time for you to go to sleep. So your bowel movement stop, your digestive system slows down. All these things happen, but if you are on your devices, you're giving yourself blue light because remember, everything enters your body through your eyes, right? So you on your devices and you continue to give yourself blue light, it tells the brain you still need to stay awake and activate. That's why by it's like midnight, you can't sleep. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, then you have to be up at 5. Then now you stress, and then it becomes a vicious cycle. So learn how to disconnect, how to plan and budget your time, go for walks, spend time with family, friends, interact, spend time in prayer, right? Keep a song in your heart. That's what I do to manage my stress. I pray without ceasing all day long. I'm singing and I'm praying because sometimes I come in contact with demons. So, no, it's the truth. Sometimes I come in contact with demons. I'm not saying that to be funny, literally. So, I have to stay pray up and manage my stress. Because when you,
Those medications that they give you could be solutions that create other problems.
that is
Because
correct.
again, if the body, as you are describing it, is naturally wired to do certain things at certain times, and you take a drug that can impact the chemistry of your brain to go beyond the time that the body says it needs this or stop that, whatever, then it's forcing the body to function contrary to the way how God wired it to function and can create deeper mental illness.
That is correct. That's why anxiety is on the rise, depression's on the rise, right? All these things. They are real because our society, we've become such a consuming society. We're always consuming. So our stress levels, they are higher. So if you're unable to sleep before you take a sleeping pill, sit down and assess your habits. Sometimes all it takes to resolve or not resolve it, but maybe address insomnia is to change some habits. If it persists, it might be something medical, but before you look at the medical, look at your habits first because lifestyle creates a lot of our problems. Any other questions? Yes.
You said the blue light. This happens in the morning.
Yes.
Now, you say this light has to, you have to see this light,
Mm.
or it has to affect your mindset.
And the interesting thing is, you don't have to see the light.
Because you're inside, so how do you, how does this affect?
That's just the way God has created.
Typically, for the blue light is the twilight. So it's the same thing. My point is, when I think of light effectively, I would have to see it, or it be on me, or somehow. But if I'm inside with the blinds closed, how am I being affected by
So
this light?
yes, that is a very great question. How are you affected? So it's not, again, a light that shines through. How would I explain that? It's not a light that shines through your blinds. It's something that's happening, and how nature is connected to us, basically. It's not some. It's the same. I see you, sister. 1 second. It's not like you, just like when you eat, right? Your body knows it needs to burn down the food, And you're not telling your body to do it, it's done automatically. So these are the things that God has put in nature for us. So whether you see it or not, it's happening because your body is connected to nature automatically.
If you explain it this way, you can't help it. That there's oxygen inside of your room, whether you see it or not. Even if you close the blinds or the curtains, it fills up with oxygen because you're breathing. Yes, somebody said. Right. Have mercy. When we sleep. Have mercy.
That is correct. That is very, very correct. One of the things that, as a parent, I have to say that I just recently became a grandmother. I'm very proud. So, as a parent, one of the things that I took to do for my children when they were of age to have cell phones was to not let the cell phone sleep in their room with them. They didn't get to have their cell phones, to be in control of using their cell phones in their room until they were of going to college. Once you're in college, unfortunately, I hope the good habits you've learned, you would practice them. But I didn't, while they're in high school, I don't use the cell phone as an alarm because that's the excuse they use. Get a good old alarm clock from Walmart. There's nothing wrong with those. I tell parents all the time, when I do parenting, when I do coaching, I tell them, take the cell phone away at night, because even though your child is sleeping, the notifications they're receiving, because your brain doesn't sleep. That is the one organ, if it sleeps, you're dead. Everything else rests except your brain. Your brain is always awake, it's always receiving and sending messages. How to breathe, when to breathe. You're cold, you're hot, do you need to pee? Are you thirsty? It never sleeps, it's always working. So, like the sister said, when you have all these things and you're receiving notification, although you're in your deep sleep, your brain is still, the noises, they're coming, things are happening.
But what was the other noises? When they're immediately around you, like on your bed, these devices. That's what I'm saying. Are they emitting radiation that could give you brain cancer? Because you're not conscious how you're absorbing from all of these devices that are already that are on, and need to be turned off. That's what you're saying.
Well, I'm not saying that, but that's what the science has proven, that they are emitting radiation. So it is wiser not to have them in your room. But if you must have them within reach, try to put them as far away as possible. No, not off. I'm saying if you need to have it on, right? Some, like, if you need to have it on. Everybody has their own lifestyle. I'm not here to dictate how you do things because it works. Again, we all have our needs. So if you need to have your cell phone for whatever reason, try not to put it next to you. Sometimes I'm very guilty of it because I turn around and I kind of use it for my, music and prayer and things. I'm trying to be more conscientious of putting it as far away from me as possible. So if you can do that, turn off your laptop, certain things, do that to reduce the emission of radiation, because everything we have is really releasing radiation. Yes. Great question. So once your brain is significantly impacted, particularly your memory, it's difficult to recover. You can improve it, but it might not come back to exactly what it used to, because when the memory loss happen, it's very subtle that you don't even realize it. Right? You can concentrate. It's like, oh, I wanted to do this. I can't remember. So there, because you have two types of memory: short-term and long-term memory. So there are different factors that are contributing to Alzheimer's diseases, but what they're saying is that continued prolonged stress is, it impacts your cognitive functioning. It's not and can lead to Alzheimer's disease. Not necessarily it does lead to it. It can, because there's
Can stress and radiation
Brain scan.
And when the results came back from the MRI, they said that the person had been sustaining continuous
Radiation.
what do you call those things that people get? Strokes, mini
Mm.
strokes. And when they looked into that, they did more detailed research. When they looked into it more detail, they found small little tiny lesions in the tissue of the brain that was responsible for sprocketing
The stroke.
the strokes,
Yeah.
the mini strokes. It was triggering the mini strokes.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, and this person, I know them well, they spend a whole lot of time over something in their ear, on the cell phone, before the computer. And I actually said to them, I said, you know what? I think a lot of your problems that the person was complaining about, I think a lot of your problems is you spend too much time on devices. I think it's electronics, too much radiation, and then the person is high stress. The combination of the two, could that tear the tissue? Could that create lesions?
Well, again,
You know,
I don't want to go beyond the scope of of my practice, right? So I have to stay within the scope of my practice. I cannot answer because I don't know what the research says. Because research is never 100% conclusive. One can say, one can infer that as a result of this is a possibility, but I can't say for a fact that it is so. That is the reason why it's important to function in moderation. It is important to function in moderation. Too much food is not good. Too little food is not good. Too much of anything is not good. So we need to, and that's why balance is important. Temperance, yes.
When we praise God, when you look at the Bible, many times they tell us when we pray, we need to close our eyes and fold our hands. The Bible never said to fold our hands. Our hands should be lifted up because after we confess, because everything is written right here. And if we go to Psalm 24, we'll say that we have a pure heart and our hands, you know what I mean, are
Righteous
supposed to
hands.
be.
Mhm.
So sometimes by doing that, the other day I was listening to a doctor saying that lifting up the hands lower your blood pressure. So sometimes by giving God praise, we are healing our own selves. So sometimes when we come to church and we just sit around thinking that we are cute, we don't do anything because we're too sophisticated to raise our hands. But sometimes we miss out on a lot of things. There is a guy by the name of Kevin Trudeau. He's Canadian and he has written a lot about health issues. And as a matter of fact, he was talking so much about it that they were threatening him. And he was saying to people, one day they're going to put me in jail. So you better listen to what I'm telling you because out there, they want to kill you. And therefore, those medications, you better be, you know what I mean, not take them because sometimes this is the cause of your whatever sickness. But what caught my attention, because a friend of mine had given me a CD and I was listening to the CD. What caught my attention is that he said, a lot of people don't understand that when they are sick, the best time for them to be healed is Friday at sunset until Saturday at sunset. He said, I know some people are religious. No, I'm not talking about that because everything in there are aligned to heal them. So you see, sometimes we do things, God tell us to do something. We don't know why, but he has something behind it. And that's why it's good to be obedient. We obey even if we don't understand. Another one, I heard a doctor say sometime, one time on the radio, family radio, and he said, you know something what they have discovered? Science has discovered that young boys, when they are 8 days old, that's when they are the most potent. And the pastor said, that's why God says to circumcise the boy at that time, because he knew they had a chance not to die. Do you understand? So sometimes God does not give us explanation. But if we are smart, just do what he asks us to do. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Are there any other questions? It's a great question. Bedtime. Well, the way the biological biological clock works, the ideal time to go to bed is 9:30, 9:45.